Good morning. It is wonderful to look out here and see so many young faces and the young at heart. Morton, I can't thank you enough for your leadership. I think it was 5,000, I wrote down 669 people who've gone through the school. Was that the number or was it a higher number?
67,000.
Oh, 100. Okay. Well, I'm one of those. So I appreciate your leadership and the Leadership Institute so much because I was in law school. I came here to Washington to go to law school, and then I had my 3 children. And over the years, I started volunteering for Frank Wolf, the member of Congress who I replaced, and met people through that volunteer effort while I was going to law school. And then when I decided to go back to work, I came to the Leadership Institute to take a class. And it was wonderful. I met my good friend Ed Gillespie, who was teaching your class there at that time and working for Mr. Army at that time. And of course, we were still in the minority at that time. This was 1990 in December. So it'll be almost 25 years, I guess, this December. And also met Carrie Knott, it was quite a good group that was teaching there, who ended up being Dick Armey's chief of staff. Ed was the communications director. And then my friend Dennis Stevens. And I know all 3 of them continue to have great relationships with the Leadership Institute. But what was so wonderful for me was I was sitting there actually learning how to be a legislative staffer that I was now applying to go back and do. And I was learning from people all the how-tos. I think I still have the big binder because I am sort of a pack rat and I don't let my husband throw anything out. So I know that's You've improved on that quite a bit. You're now online. You do everything, all around the world. But I appreciate your leadership and getting this gal off to a great start. And I was fortunate in 2009 when Congressman Wolf called me and asked me to run for office in the State House of Delegates. Where did I go when I needed a campaign manager? Anyone guess? I came to LI, and my campaign manager, who had volunteered had worked on the presidential campaign, had come here to LI after, and so I saw that on the resume, and it was a pretty quick interview, and it worked out very well, and I won my first race by 422 votes, so I'm very glad I had that LI leadership. And I can't thank Morton without thanking Helen. Because all of you know here who've known Morton and Helen for years, this is a team, and this is an awesome team. And all those years that I've been able to volunteer working for Frank Wolf, because I started in 1984, I started first volunteering, Helen and Morton, because back in those days, Arlington was in the district, in the 10th district. And we worked side by side, and actually when I was looking at running. I guess actually I'd already decided to run. I think it was one of your New Year's Eve parties that I came and I talked to you, and Lola Reinsch was there. So I think you were 2 of the first people I told that I was going to run. So and Helen was there, and we all, our prayers are with you and Helen. We know she's facing challenges, and we just thank both of you for all of your leadership and legacy here that continues on. So I wanted to bring, because I think last time I was here, I wasn't on the wall yet, so I wanted to bring my picture. And thank you. It's like I'm very honored to be to be on there, so thank you. Well, as Morton said, we do live in very interesting times, and as you were telling the story about all the emails and everything, and our friend Lois Lerner, it reminded me that I am one of those lucky people, and maybe a few of you are here. How many of you have been getting letters from the government telling you your files have been breached? Anybody here? Yeah. See hands going up. Well, I'm a triple recipient. Actually, I think I've only received 2 of them so far, but I've been told I'll be getting a third. My IRS files, I got earlier this year, I got a letter saying that my IRS tax files had been breached. And then I got the letter that my OPM personnel file had been breached. And I guess our friends, the news indicates, if you believe, that our friends in China are reading them. So I guess somebody's going to be reading our things, even if we don't know about it ourselves. And then our background files have now been breached. So I am serving on the Research and Technology Subcommittee. We've already had numerous hearings on this. So I am very pleased that particularly when so many of my constituents are faced with this situation, that I am able to work on these issues, and that is one of my priorities to work on, because not only will that be, a personal breach of our information, imagine, the kind of information that gives to our enemies and what can be used with it. So it is, frightening to consider that. I mean, I'm in the public sphere. I expect a lot of the things, and people digging around. But for, say, people who are working at the CIA and are, really trying to do a lot of the nation's important classified work, to the thought that their information is now breached, and when they're traveling abroad, that they might be in danger and things like that, really makes this an imperative. And so many of us in Congress did call for the firing of the OPM chief. Fortunately, she did step down. I'm pleased to report that the new OPM chief has been more aggressively working on this issue and working with us, but we have a long way to go. But that's just one of the many challenges we face. And today I wanted to talk about one of the biggest issues we're going to be facing here in several weeks when we go back, and that is this very misguided Iran deal. This is, just an unacceptable deal that, from the start, throughout the proceedings, we have just every principle that was laid out, mainly the fundamental that, a nuclear Iran is unacceptable. That's what we went in saying, that this deal was, that was the top priority. And unfortunately, this deal fails that fundamental test. And so that is why I cannot support it, and I don't believe there are any of my Republican colleagues who are. And as you know, the opposition to the deal is bipartisan. It is broad and bipartisan. The American people, by almost a 2-to-1 margin, or maybe it's more right now, oppose this deal, and they get it. They understand how dangerous this is. I was able to go on, they have a freshman trip to Israel that Leader McCarthy took us on. There also were some sophomores on that trip. And we spent over a week in Israel really seeing up close why this is so dangerous. And it was not only the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke to us and was very opposed to it. His opponent, who ran against him this year, spoke to us and had that same view. He might have a different style, he might have a different way of approaching it, but his opposition was very clear, as was the opposition of people from the media. What a surprise. The media, the military, civilians. We met with families. We went to families' homes, had dinner with them just to, we had a Shabbat dinner on Friday night to, just visit with a family and understand what they're dealing with. And we were able to visit with a family whose daughter was 20 years old and serving in the military, because service is mandatory in Israel. It is 2 years for women and 3 for men. And these young people are so incredible and inspiring, because they are, out there working for their country, and they understand up front, on the front lines, how dangerous this is. And our first day when we got there, we went down and visited the Gaza border. And we were able to stand on the border and see where last summer they were lobbing in the missiles. And this is territory that Israel gave back, and it was very valuable territory. And what happened was they moved their missiles up and started lobbing them, into Israel. And you all saw what was happening last summer. And we were briefed at an Iron Dome battery down there on the Gaza border by a young man who was 20 years old, who spent his summer last summer deciding, when you have to shoot down these missiles as they're coming over. They have to very quickly evaluate, is it going to hit a field? Is it going to hit where civilians are? Where is this headed? What is the target? And then they have to make those split second decisions. and keep their country safe. And it was incredible to see a young man with that responsibility who was so impressive, understood that he was literally protecting his neighbors, protecting his community, and the kind of maturity that you see there was just incredibly impressive and inspiring. And we saw that throughout the week. We didn't just meet with people involved in the military and dealing with that threat, but we also met with tech leaders there and entrepreneurs. And these young people who have to grow up pretty quick when you're deciding, when you're literally saving your neighborhood, that grows you up pretty quickly. And as a result, they have some really impressive technology entrepreneurs and people who, they understand what risk-taking is about and living life to its fullest because they're facing life and death every day. We had a gentleman who spoke to us who's very involved in the Iron Dome, implementation and worked. He was a rocket scientist, so he knows a little bit about this. And he showed us a video from, I believe it must have been from last summer, where his nephew was getting married. And you can see this online on YouTube if you haven't seen it. It's called the Iron Dome Wedding. And what happens when, the missiles are coming over, the sirens go off. And so people, they have bomb shelters in their homes. If you're driving, they pull over and they do things. Well, this was a wedding that was going on when one of the sirens went off because the missiles were coming over. And the couple was out getting their pictures taken. So imagine you're at your wedding, you're in the dress, this is the big day, you're getting your pictures taken and the siren goes off. So the couple decided they wanted to keep taking the pictures. And the videographer continued with the video. And it's not humorous, but it's really tells you the life and death situation they have. But behind them, you can see the missile intercept in the picture, and the wedding went on. But that's fortunately the help that the United States has given on the Iron Dome, and that was nearly unanimous, all of the votes for that. But that is literally life and death over there in a situation like that. So it was incredibly powerful to see and hear from people up close, as well as hear from people who had lost loved ones last summer and who are dealing with that every day. So to get back to the deal does fail at the fundamentals of a non-nuclear Iran. Instead, and this was, I think, something, we've all here in the United States focused on, all the cheating, the side deals, and how we haven't read them, and we haven't gotten access to that yet, and how the verification isn't going to work, and that is all very important. But the real problem with this deal is that it sets a path forward for a nuclear Iran, even if they don't cheat, between 13 to 15 years from now. And really think of how soon that is, because we're coming up on the 14th anniversary of 9/11. And even you young people probably can remember where you were on 9/11. And for those of us who are older, that doesn't seem so long ago. And I know Carla and I lost a very good friend, and many of us lost a good friend here and lost many friends, people here in our community. And I think those of us here in the Washington area, that was so real to us. And so like our friends in Israel who see those missiles going off in a wedding video, we know how personal that is. And so I think that's my phone going off, sorry. Might go off in a while. But that is a very quick time. That's going to be when my granddaughter is just 14 and a half years old. So that is, if we have a nuclear Iran, so that is in our lifetime. And so that is unacceptable. And not only does Israel understand that and understand the threat that is, but all of the Middle Eastern neighbors understand that. If you want to take that and turn it off, sorry. So what is going to happen is you're going to have an arms race. And we've all already, when my colleagues travel to the Mideast, they don't only hear from Israel. Now, I was just traveling in Israel, but others have traveled to other countries, and they hear from the other countries, we don't like this deal. Now, they're not out talking as publicly about it as we are, because their situations in their countries really don't allow them to go out and they feel intimidated to go out and talk about it. But they do tell my colleagues, offline that they would be delighted to see us vote down this deal. And you all probably heard about the story about the French, some French leaders who were telling our colleagues offline, a bipartisan group of them offline, that they don't want to see this deal go forward. And then there was a little back and forth, and they kind of admitted, yes, they did realize that this was bad. Now, the French, aren't known as the toughest negotiators in the world, but they're saying we can go back to the negotiating table. And in fact, we have gone back dozens of times in situations in the past. Congress can go back and work a better deal, because the reason we're at the table is we know the sanctions were working. And so that's why we do have to say no to this deal and no to a nuclear Iran. It allows them to keep their ICBMs and continue to move forward there. And they want to have these weapons not just so they can hit Israel. Israel's the little Satan to them. Who's the big Satan? That's us. They are chanting death to America. And usually I think when people chant death to America, you probably should take them seriously, right? That's a pretty basic concept. But this would, if we were to go forward with this deal, it pretty immediately frees up, billions of dollars for the number one state sponsor of terror to start getting back into the game. And what one person said to us, and I think it was not somebody from the Prime Minister's side of the aisle, I think it was on the other side of the aisle, said the assumption of this deal is that in about 5 years from now, you're going to wake up and Iran's going to be the Netherlands. Now, does that sound logical to any of you? Anyone buy that idea that they're just it's going to be kumbaya, they're going to stop all the mean things they're doing, and they are going to be the Netherlands? That's sort of the assumption. And we're going to trust, we're going to apparently, according to these side deals we haven't seen, we're going to let them verify themselves. And I think, I think as any parent of teenagers knows, you don't do that. Certainly when you're dealing with Iran, you don't want to do that. So many of the problems with this deal. So all of that money unleashed and what it could do is certainly very threatening to our security and makes for a much more unstable Middle East, which makes for a much more dangerous world. Now, let's see. Well, there's so many things wrong with it. So where can I go from there? And they still will have, many of the centrifuges. So, on all fronts, what part of this is a bad deal don't you understand? I know those of you here and leaders on these issues, you do understand that. So, it is going to be a challenge, and the president has worked very hard on this, and it is disappointing to see already in my state, a number of my colleagues here in Northern Virginia on the other side of the aisle have already very quickly come forward on this. Senator Kaine has also already indicated his support for the deal. Senator Warner has not indicated how he's going, but I certainly can tell you I would have rather had my friend Ed Gillespie, who I know I can tell you where he would have stood, and he wouldn't be hemming and hawing and waiting to see if he needs to vote with Barack Obama on an important deal like this. He would be out front in the early days leading on this. So I do thank you, Morton, for your support of Ed and all your efforts, and I certainly a few more votes here in the Senate could make a difference. We do have a good, we have bipartisan opposition and in the House, and I think we will have a number of our colleagues joining us because they're here. When you're in the House, you hear from people a little bit closer, and you are. And I think this needs to be a very important issue that we not only talk about this year, but it's going to be a presidential issue, as it should be. And fortunately, because of I think one strong message that we got, regardless of what happens on this, our allies in Israel are going, that relationship is strong with us. Even if the president doesn't appreciate that relationship and the necessity of it the way we need to, and even if some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't, that relationship will continue to be strong. They will do what they have to do to protect their people, as they always have. And I am so proud of the relationship that we have with Israel, we, the American people, because I think the American people understand the importance of this. And that's been very heartening as you see the American people get this. How many things 2-to-1 do the American people rise up and really strongly make a statement on? So I am, optimistic, regardless of what happens on the vote later this month, about the resolve of the American people to do the right thing, because as Winston Churchill always said, the American people do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Unfortunately, with this president, we are in that time of trying everything else, but we do the right thing, and I think you see that very hopeful America rising up, even if this president is still trying to push that down. So I'd be happy to open it up to questions if you'd like. I think.